Hello everyone. Welcome to the second video in the series on sentences. So before going to the actual tips, let us have a look at two sentences. Advise employers in the development and implementation of effective, the highlighted portion, workplace substance abuse prevention program policies. Wow. What exactly would be the meaning of that? Workplace substance abuse prevention program policies. So I see two possibilities. One is they want to have some policies for some prevention program at the workplace so that people don't abuse substances at the workplace. The second meaning which is possible as per my understanding is that they want to have some program in the workplace, some policies about the program so that people don't use substance at all. Like they want to prevent substance abuse as a whole. So it is not very clear from the sentence. That is because they have stacked so many nouns there in one sentence continuously. So that is the topic of today's presentation, noun strings. Now some of you may feel that no, not many people write like this. They like this a series of 6 nouns and all. It is not very common. Why are you saying all this to us? Fine, agreed. But the milder forms are like very common in the writing that we see on a day-to-day basis and even in the papers that we ourselves write. Another example. Let us see more common example. Internet coping skills training program. That is highlighted portion only. So what would that mean? Like it looks like they are training somebody about how to cope with the internet, but it is not like that. The entire sentence reads internet coping skills training program for youth with type 1 diabetes. So again it is confusing. So actually it seems like what they mean is like some online coping skills program for youth with type 1 diabetes. But again the construction of the sentence is such that the reader is confused at least momentarily. They have to pause and try to untangle the relationship between the words and then like move forward. Like that again, as I told in one of the previous videos, breaks that experience of reading. So how to avoid this kind of situations in your own writing? That is what we are going to examine in this particular video. Watch till the end. So before discussing what exactly is a noun string, let us like remind ourselves what exactly a noun means. A noun is basically a word that names a thing, that is name of a thing. That can be grossly of two types, there could be concrete nouns or or there could be abstract nouns. Concrete noun means that name is that of something you can touch and see and hear and feel and all, like child, earth and all. At the same time, names or nouns can be of abstract concepts also, something you cannot directly see with your five senses. For example, therapy, system and all. So this is what a noun means. So what's a noun string? Noun string is like the kind of phrases that we saw earlier. A phrase composed of consecutive nouns where the final noun is modified by the preceding nouns. Like we have a series of nouns, like for example, sleep hygiene education program. So basically what exactly this means? The entire thing refers to a program that is about a sleep hygiene education. So the word sleep, hygiene and education actually modify the word program. So we have a series of nouns and the last is also a noun, and the remaining nouns, their purpose basically is to describe, to add some qualifications to the final word, sleep hygiene education program, like that. So here is another example, medication regimen complexity. So again it is about the complexity of the medication regimen, but like the last word is complexity, the other words, the medication regimen, both are like modifying the word complexity. So this is what we mean by the word noun string. Again, like here point of revision, recently we had another video about some of the words that are commonly like wrongly used in academic writing. What about the word regimen? Is it regimen? Is regimen the correct word, or should we use regime? Any idea? Okay, the answer is both are correct. Both regimen and regime both are correct. That was just an aside. We will move on with our topic. So why we are against noun string? Why we are having a session on noun strings? Because when we have a noun string, as I told you earlier, that is not very easy for the readers to make sense of that phrase, because there is a series of words, and because of when the readers are going through that, they will have to pause and mentally untangle the meaning. Though, like we saw the definition that the last noun is the one that is being modified. There is a series of noun, but the remaining nouns actually refer to, like, describe the last noun. But the readers may not know that. The readers may feel confused, like especially when there is a series of nouns, like some of the middle nouns. They may feel that the other nouns are referring to this one. So they may be confused, at least momentarily. Like this medication regimen complexity, that is not very confusing. There are only 3 words, so there, like, most of the readers will not be confused. They will know that medication regimen are actually referring to complexity, that is about the complexity of the medication regimen, fine. But for longer phrases, like the ones that we saw in the beginning, like there there is a higher chance that the readers will be confused. That is what happened in the examples that we saw in the beginning. Internet coping skills training program. So here, like as we discussed in the beginning, there was a confusion. What is this program about? Also the gem that we discussed in the beginning, that is also because, like, prevention is in between, substance abuse is in between. So like which one is the noun that is being which is being modified by, not modified, described by or explained by the other nouns, that part may be confusing to the readers. So how to solve, that is the major issue, right? Suppose accidentally or out of habit you have written a noun string in one of your articles. So how to edit it to normalcy, to such a manner that the readers find it clear. So first you have to consider, like, how many nouns are there in the string. Suppose there are only 2 nouns, that is not a huge issue, because it is unlikely that a noun string that has only 2 nouns is confusing to readers. For example, if you see a noun string like calculation tool or conflict management, they are all very clear. So 2 nouns means there is no need for you to do anything about that. Leave them where they are, as they are. Now suppose there are 3 nouns in the series. Again, you have 2 options. You have to look at it and you have to decide for yourself, like whether this is going to be clear to the reader or whether there is a chance of any confusion to the reader. Based on that, you decide. For example, a 3 noun string like hypertension management protocol. It is like, to me, it feels like it will not be confusing to most readers. So you can leave it like that. There is no need to modify that. At the same time, this example that we discussed earlier, medication regimen complexity, I personally feel that it is better to modify that so that the readers find it more easier to read. And then those nouns, so those strings that have more than 3 words, obviously you have to rewrite them, so that, because if there are more than 3 nouns, like, you can expect that it will be difficult for the readers to make sense of them. So now, like, how to, like, suppose there is a 3 noun string that may be confusing, or there is a string that has more than 3 nouns. So how to correct them? So we will briefly look at the various steps first, and after that, like, we will see some examples. First, you have to do what you have to do is, like, you have to reorder the words. You start with the last word in the string, you bring it to the beginning, and then we have to do something more. What we have to do is, we have to clarify the relationship between the words. Like we saw earlier, that the confusion arises because the readers are not very sure about how the words are related to each other, what is modifying what and all. So to clarify the relationship between the words, you have to add some prepositions and articles. Oh, some yeah, English grammar jargon, but we will discuss them in in a quick manner. Articles are the words a and the. I think all of you know that. Incidentally, that reminds me of an incident from our school. Like in one of our exams, I think it was in 4th standard or something, there was a question, fill with a, an, or the. And one of my friends, what he did was, he used or to answer, to fill that sentence. So okay, leave it at that. Prepositions are words that indicate relationship between other words in a sentence. It will be clear to you once you see an example. Above, at, in, of, to, with. All these words are prepositions. So we have to use articles and prepositions to make the relationship between the various nouns in the string clearer to the reader. So let us start by solving one of the examples that we discussed in the beginning. So we have this medication regimen complexity. So as I told you, we have to bring the last term, the last noun to the beginning. So it becomes complexity in the beginning. So after that we have to add like prepositions and articles. So it becomes complexity of the medication regimen. So we have a preposition here, an article here, and overall a clearer phrase here, complexity of the medication regimen. So that is how we solve. Now another technique that you can use is change at least one of the nouns, because that is a noun string, right? So one of the nouns you change to a verb. That also will make the portion, the sentence clearer. For example, this one, sleep hygiene education program. So like we have the noun education here. So we can try converting that to a verb. So it becomes program to educate about sleep hygiene. So educate is a verb. So this way also you can make the, like you can untangle the noun string and make the sentence like more clear. Now another technique you can use is you can use hyphenation to indicate closely related words. That way also, like the length of the string or maybe the number of nouns, different nouns in the string can be reduced. Let us see an example. Population level dementia prevention strategy. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nouns there, right? So as I told you, if you use some hyphens to like indicate the relationship between the various nouns there, so it may become clearer. For example, you can make it population hyphen level, so that becomes population level. Then dementia hyphen prevention, so that becomes dementia prevention strategy. So in effect, basically now we have only like, it is like we have only 3 nouns or 3 groups. So that is like clearer than the initial one. So this is the use of this hyphens is another technique you can use. Now another technique is like in the string there are, because it is confusing because there are loads of nouns. So one option you have is if you feel that like 1 or 2 of the nouns are not that essential, you can delete them so that the string becomes clear. See this one, drug prescription pattern observation at the ENT OPD department, wherever. So here we have drug prescription pattern observation. Okay, so all these are nouns and I feel that this observation part is not that essential. Even without that the title may make sense. So you can say drug prescription pattern at, or maybe you can use other techniques, pattern of drug prescription at, like that moving to the beginning, then adding articles, prepositions. So that way also you can break the string. Pattern of drug prescription act. Use acronyms when feasible. Suppose in the string there is one phrase for which there is a well-known acronym. Then you can like reduce the number of nouns in the string by replacing that particular expansion into its appropriate corresponding acronym. For example, adult attention deficit hyperactivity disorder symptoms. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nouns are there. At the same time, most of you know that attention deficit hyperactive disorder is basically ADHD. So especially if you have used the acronym, introduced the acronym before, so what you can do with this string is you can make it adult ADHD symptoms. So now we have only 3. Or better still, you can also use the other techniques that we like discussed just now. Hyphen adult ADHD, then symptoms, or you can say symptoms of adult ADHD. Anyway, like if you use any of these ways as per your taste, but for the reader that makes their work easier. At the same time, like I told you that noun strings are difficult, you have to disentangle them and all, but if it helps clarity, there is no harm in leaving some parts of the string intact. If you feel that that is what will help the readers understand what you are saying. For example, an outpatient group behavior therapy program in bulimia nervosa. So we have outpatient group behavior therapy program 5, right? At the same time, when you are like editing that, when you are correcting that, basically group behavior therapy is a string that most people will understand, like they will not find it very confusing. So what you can say is program of group behavior therapy for outpatients. You need not touch this part. Otherwise, no, it may be more confusing. Like though what you intended was to make it easier for the readers. And also don't rewrite. Suppose the phrase that you are encountering, that you are working with is something that is well known, very familiar to your readers, then there is no need to like touch it. There is no need to rewrite that. You can leave it just like that also, because our ultimate aim is not eradicating noun strings. Now our ultimate aim is to make the reading the writing clearer, to more like easier for the readers to understand. For example, serum lithium level estimation, that is a well-known phrase. Any person who like have heard that before will understand that like what it exactly means. You need not change that to estimation of levels of lithium in the serum. If you do that, again your word count increases and the clarity also suffers. So that's it about noun strings. We have more like videos on the sentences coming. If you found this video useful, do click that share button and share this link to your appropriate contacts, students, fellow researchers and all. And also, like as we are more and more videos coming, those of you who have not subscribed, do click the subscribe button and also the bell button so that you get a notification when we upload the next video. Thanks for watching.